Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Commander deck tech. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Samut, Vizier of Naktamun. It is 1 red and a green for a 2/3 legendary creature human warrior cleric, with first strike, vigilance and haste. It has, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, if that creature enters the battlefield this turn, draw a card. I love me a commander that has the word draw a cards on it, and I also love commanders that do it by attacking our opponents. There's 2 ways that we can draw cards with Samut, and both involve hitting our opponents with creatures. The first is by simply playing a creature with haste. If it deals damage to an opponent that turn, with Samut out, we draw a card, which we love. The other way is with creatures that come into play tapped and attacking, such as a Goblin token of a Rabblemaster card, or a token copy of Myriad. Those creatures have come into play that turn, so if they deal damage, they will trigger Samut and will draw a card. This is where most of our hasty threats will come from, as these are basically mini armies in a can. One creature can come down and make a bulk load of attacking tokens turn after turn that repeatedly let us draw cards with Samut out if they can get through for damage. So effectively, this is going to be a Haste Matters tokens deck that will be using Samut as a card draw engine to keep our hand full, while we continually just keep putting threat after threat onto the board until we overwhelm our opponents. Because of that ability on Samut caring mainly about creatures, this is going to be a very creature heavy deck, and we'll see this in all the sections of the video, from card draw to ramp to our win conditions. A quick note on how this video will work. Basically, we'll be giving you all the different categories that you need to make the deck. We won't be giving you a full deck list, we'll be giving you options for you to choose and make the deck yourself. So you can choose the ones to suit your budget or your playstyle. Any cards we mention will be down in the description below. The first section to go through is our Hasty Effects, as it were. These will either bring things that make hasty creatures, or effects that give our creatures haste. First up is some Rabblemaster creatures. What we're looking for is a good creature body that when it attacks makes more creatures that are tapped and attacking. The tokens these creatures make will count as entering the battlefield this turn, so if they deal damage to a player, we'll draw a card for each one that gets through. You have things like Kari, Skyship Raider, Goblin Rabblemaster, Hanweir Garrison, Krenko Tin Street Kingpin, Legion Warboss, Loyal Apprentice and Squee Dubious Monarch. If it's a body that makes a body, then it's perfect for this deck. We then also have some cards with Myriad, like Elturel Survivors and Warchief Giant. When these attack, they make a token copy attacking each other opponent, so they scale fantastically in a multiplayer game like Commander. Next we have some enchantments that repeatedly make tokens for us to attack with every combat. Urabrask's Forge makes a bigger and bigger token once it's down, and then Rite of the Raging Storm makes us and our opponents a hasty 5/1 every combat that can never come our way. Next up we have some spells that'll make hasty tokens of other creatures that we are playing. Feldon of the Third Path lets us make a hasty clone of something in our graveyard. Flameshadow Conjuring can double up a creature that we've played for just a single red mana, and then we have Jaxis making a copy of our best creature while letting us do some card filtering as well. Then we also have Orthion, Hero of Lavabrink, which again makes us a hasty copy of the best creature we control, or if we have the mana, we can make 5 copies of something. Absolutely perfect for copying one of our token makers. Then lastly, we just have some effects that give our whole board haste. Ardoz, Cobbler of War and Ogre Battledriver are just the best options here, as not only do they give our whole board haste, but they also give them +2/+0 as well the turn they come in. Absolute units of cards that our token making Rabblemaster cards will absolutely love, as they'll really pile the damage onto our opponents. Then we have cards like Fervor and Fires of Yavimaya, which just straight give our whole board haste. Then you have things like Rhythm of the Wild that can give a creature haste, or it can buff it up with a counter if we ever need something bigger. If we can get Anger into our graveyard, then it's really hard for opponents to ever stop us having haste forever, and then Urabrask is a really annoying creature for our opponents that speeds up our attackers while making our opponents' blockers come into play tapped. Next up is our ramp section. Like with other sections of this deck, this will primarily be made up of creatures, so if we can give them haste, they can get into the red zone to draw us some lovely additional cards. When talking about creatures making mana, it means that firstly we obviously need to talk about some mana dorks. These are cheap creatures that can come down early and then generate us mana so we can cast the rest of our spells. On top of classic cards like Birds of Paradise, Elvish Mystic, Findhorn Elves and Llanowar Elves, we also have a hasty version that can tap for both of our colours with Beastcaller Savant. Then we have Goblin Archaeomancer, a card that basically makes most things in our whole deck cost 1 generic less to cast. Perfect for letting us get the damage through nice and early. For some more synergistic options, we have cards like Atalan Jackal, a hasty creature in itself that we love, that when it deals combat damage to a player, gets a basic land from our deck and puts it into play tapped. Then we have Professional Facebreaker, a creature that makes us a treasure token whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, perfect for giving us some extra ramp. We then have Xenagos the Reveler. At a base level, its 0 can just make us a hasty creature ready to attack. But if we have any kind of board state, we can +1 it to make a bunch of mana equal to the number of creatures that we control. If everything's going anywhere near decent, with all our token makers, this should hopefully add up to a lot of mana. Then lastly, we have some mana rocks, with staples like Soul Ring, Arcane Signet and Thought Vessel. While these don't really synergize with the rest of the deck, having some diversity on our ramp will be important just in case our whole board ever eats a board wipe. Next up is some card draw. While our commander is what will really push the deck over the edge, we still need a base to get the deck rolling in the first place. First up we have Beast Whisperer and Guardian Project, fantastic spells that draw us a card whenever we play a non-token creature, which as you've seen from the makeup of the deck so far, will be a large portion of the deck. Next we have Tribute to the World Tree. This card is absolutely phenomenal in this deck. If a creature enters with 3 or more power, we draw a card. If one comes in with 3 or less power, it gets 2+1 on counters on it. This will include our commander and the tokens from our Rabblemaster cards, meaning this will lead to so much extra damage it is insane. Next up we have Toski, Bearer of Secrets and Orhan Frostfang. Great cards that'll basically be additional copies of our commander by drawing us yet more cards whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to one of our opponents. And then 2 cards that reward us for all those tokens that we are making in this deck, with cards like Skullclamp, which let us cash in those tokens for some extra card draw, or a card like Idol of Oblivion, which is basically a cheaper version of Phyrexian Arena. Then we have cards like Shamanic Revelation and Collective Unconscious. These basically draw us cards equal to the number of creatures that we control. These could definitely be a bit Winmore-y, but it is commander and the point is to go big. Next up is our interaction section. Like with most decks, we're looking for at least 8 bits here, going up the more competitive your playgroup is. First up, we're going to be looking at Beast Within and Chaos Warp. Fantastic options that can answer anything that we need to, absolutely perfect for any Gruul deck. Next we have Kenrith Transformation. Is there an annoying creature or commander on the board? Awesome, it's now Elk. Problem solved. Then we have some answers to a wide range of things, with cards like Nature's Claim, Abrade and Hull Breach. Really good versatile options for when we just need an answer. For some board wipes, we have some great cards like Chain Reaction and Blasphemous Act, perfect for keeping the board in check. Next up is a little bit of protection. When our commander is drawing us a bunch of cards, there's a good chance it'll paint a bit of a target on its back. These are there to help keep it and our board state around. First, we have Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. Really solid in most decks anyways, but the added haste here will be really perfect for the deck. We then have a card like Dolam Gate. This prevents all combat damage that is dealt to our creatures when they attack, meaning we can swing in as much as we want knowing our board is completely safe. Then we have Heroic Intervention, and the much more budget-friendly Rapid Vigor. These are great cards to protect our whole board from a wrath, so we can keep all of our hard work in the game. Okay, let's move on to some dedicated ways of winning the game, and we have some really cool options to go over. First up, we have cards that give us extra combat steps. There's plenty of options in red nowadays, but cards like Karlach, Fury of Avernus, Relentless Assault, and Fury of the Horde are really cool, and importantly, nice budget options as well. Next we have cards that deal damage to our opponents whenever a creature comes into play under our control, meaning we're hitting them for damage before we even connect. Cards like Impact Tremors, Witty Roastmaster, and Perforous God of the Forged are great at continually bringing down our opponent's life totals. Next we have one of my favourite cards in Commander with Champion of Lambolt. This gets a counter whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, and then our opponent's creatures with power less than the champion's can't block our creatures. Honestly, with just a couple of swings from a Rabblemaster, this could make our whole board unblockable, meaning we get to draw a bunch of cards while dealing a ton of damage, a fantastic card in any creature-based aggressive deck like this. Then we have Deathleaper Terror Weapon. This gives all the creatures that we put into play an attack with Double Strike, for when you just need to kill an opponent twice as quickly. To speed up that death even more, we have creatures like Craterhoof Behemoth and the much more reasonably priced Endraze Forerunners. These buff up our team a bunch to make them a lethal threat. If it matters, they also have haste, so if your opponents for whatever reason aren't dead, they will draw you some cards as well. Hooray! Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, as we're only 2 colours, we have some pretty solid options available to us. First up is lands that can make us some token creatures that can attack straight away. Dana the Bugbear and Seken's Crucible of Defiance are just really solid options here, and can importantly add to that token count. Then we have some lands that can give our creatures haste. Again, some nice added redundancy in this deck. And we also have the nice bonus of potentially being able to merge Hanweir Battlements to get the backside, which is always a ton of fun. Then we have a card like Reliquary Tower, which means we have no maximum hand size. Great in this deck where we should hopefully be drawing a bucket load of cards. Then we have some spells that can let our Rabblemaster cards get through unblocked, so they're ready to go again next turn. You have things like Access Tunnel and Rogue's Passage, which are fantastic for this. We then have Kessig Wolfrun, a very solid mana sink that makes a creature get through for damage nice and big to pile on the death to our opponents. So thank you all very much for watching. If you found this video anywhere helpful or you've enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. Less than 10% of people who watch these videos are subscribed. We're really trying to get that number up. Basically, the more subscribers we get, the more time I can spend on the channel and the more content I can make for you all. It would really help me out and I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if there's any other commanders from this set that you would like me to do a deck take on, do put them down in the comments. I do get ideas from them. This video was a request from someone down in the comments, so if there's one that you would like, put it down there. I might just make a video on it. But anyway, until next time, I will see you all soon. Goodbye.